Let me tell y'all how I first learned to count. I was this tiny little nugget, and I had this beautiful mama who would hold me in the mornings. That mama loved her coffee like nobody's business for all of her earthly days. And on these days, she would make a little bitty side cup of it really sweet with condensed milk. And she would take spoonfuls of it and fly them into my mouth like they were planes. And we would count them together. Somewhere down the way, when I started to think more deeply about everything, I remembered this. And the sudden metaphor to me became that from the very moment I learned to quantify in this world, because of my mother, I did so in measures of sweetness. Another mental signpost I made for myself when I arrived amid a more collegiate way of thinking was the realization that I or anyone couldn't, in the natural order of things, really remain close to other souls unless they were willing to assume the best of your intent, operate from the benefit of the doubt, shoot from a place of grace. I put it in a song lyric of mine and tried not to sweat the small stuff when people dissolved out of my life. But for some reason, what I didn't realize at the time was that I had been living up close and personal with the grand Zen master deluxe of that this whole time, my mom. She kept people close, and even when life pulled them away in different directions, maintained the most solid of bridges, because she simply gave people grace, didn't assume negative intentions, let people be human, grow, live their lives, and happily touch down in community when they were willing and able. I guess what I'm saying is that she didn't waste her time and mental space harboring blame, and that increased her happiness quotient big time. Part of why I love when my uncommonly effusive cousin Noelle goes on about Susie is when we tally up our collective memory. She dramatically backs up the almost total absence of her ever saying anything bad about anyone. I've never heard her say anything mean, Daniel. And aside from the ruminations of the lack of malice, there are these thoughts about her outward disposition. The other day, Noelle told me, I don't think I've ever seen her frown in my life. I pair that with the fact that in all the condolences that have already come my way, and maybe the most reoccurring of sentiments I'm hearing with regularity is the simple awe of her smile. Honestly, there was something transcendent about it. And please let me share with y'all intimately. At the end there, when things became pretty much nonverbal, the absolute full-body comfort I would receive when she would just flash me that signature smile of hers was something that communicated ineffably to me on another plane. It was love. So maybe y'all are already thinking it. I've thought of it for sure. This sweetly important homecoming queen narrative, all of these attributes tie into the fact that she was voted in to be homecoming queen her junior year, no less. And then when you imagine the amount of underbelly Mean Girls style grumbling that had to go on amongst the seniors at the time, she was still voted onto the court her senior year too. Now that resounds to me as congenial fortitude. But I mostly want to think beyond the high school artifice of it all and say that the stories of my mom speak to her ability to pull people together, not apart. And in this day and age, I dare say that's one of the most valuable traits one can possess. She spent a lifetime of planning beautiful events to get her classmates together again, laughing and dancing and catching up over good food, all while my generation can barely hold together 5 working friendships. There's one additional thing I think it's important to add to the homecoming vignette. One might all too easily assume that someone having landed in that track, that their patterns might zone in on the more superficial details sometimes. And yet, I can honestly say that I don't hold a recollection of her giving big fuss or merit towards physical beauty much at all as she raised us. People were always given credulity and value for who they were. I look at the swipe left, boxes checked, filtered selfie generation and think how direly they could use a page from this woman who never once took a selfie, but who somehow showed up to my birthday with a wrapped up electric lint remover amongst the packages when it had been the most casual of mentions weeks before that I was frustrated with pilling on some of my sweaters. A listening heart. That isn't homecoming. That's home creating. And so lately, between the forms and the nurses and official records, we've been asked, what were her interests? And while I could name certain things that are very well, the preservation boards and blankets she crocheted on the way to Gulf Shores, and the unmistakable thrift store garage sale jeans she passed on to me, for sure, it all really dissolves into us wanting to say she was interested in supporting people, keeping them in touch and together and thriving. She was interested in being the right kind of nucleus. As a member of her family, that's an interest of hers for which I remain inexpressibly grateful. And that said, I love how there were these shifting boundaries for what she liked and wanted to tolerate. But she always found the kindest means of making those boundaries known. I have this vague memory that an early pet name that my dad called her was Noodle. Super sweet. But I think compound that with years of marriage and it being called out in moments of frustration. Noodle, this fudge your work keeps giving us could choke a mule, led to it being notched down on the strata of feel-good verbiage. And so finally one day with I don't think that was ever something I signed up to be called, that was that, and I never heard it again. Even when some tiny version of me saw the half-starved French Quarter musicians playing for tips and said, one day I want to be like them, all I really got was a shift in attention, a gentle, well, maybe come over here and see these portraits. But I'm sure you will get to do plenty of great things with your life. And yes, she sure modeled that. Towards the very end there, the things that she managed to come up with, despite zero psychedelics entering her system that we know of, were pretty brazenly creative. She was reaching almost nonverbal stage in the middle of one night, and she managed to eke out telling me that she needed a straw and a pair of scissors. When I returned with exactly that, Kim frantically verbalized, wait, no, you don't need that, Gammy. Here, you just relax and concentrate on resting. But considering how relatively little we know about interstellar quantum physics, she definitely may have needed it for a wormhole or something. And I feel bad. And there was a little window of time thereafter when we actually thought that her very last words were going to be, everything is gonna be cool. Did my own little mom manage to out Bob Marley? And for all practical purposes, that kind of was her last words, if full-on sentences are what counts. But the heart-meltingly poignant thing to me there is that even in the midst of her own dire straits, there she was, making sure that it was those that she loved who were okay. Selfless till the last. That's who raised me. And certain things you just wonder when they're gone, no matter how much you remember to say and ask when they were there. You wonder when they decided to stop wearing dresses when all their mom wore were dresses. You wonder how they decided the guy fresh from the Marines, whose eyes she felt on her en masse, who pretty immediately told her, I think I'm in love with you, wasn't a creepo, but instead might be future husband material. You wonder whether you managed to thank them profusely enough for certain things, because their giving was just endless. endless, endless, echoing up through the stars and infinity and the zillions of uncountable lives they touched. And you marvel that you were divinely chosen to be right up at a breath's distance to her for a sweet little lifetime. Thank you, Susie, Mother, Gammy, Mama, Noodle. One of a kind doesn't even begin to clay the language of what you were and are.